Good evening. This is Chip. Oh, get rid of the light below and put on a light above. This is Chipicon, and this is Otherworldly, the Changing Times, Changing Worlds Wednesday show. And tonight, the subject is going to be, well, the guest is Michael Hughes. Is the middle initial important?
The middle initial is, yeah, there's so many Michael Hugheses out there.
Are there? Okay. So, Michael M. Hughes. He has written a book which I was very excited about, Magic for the Resistance. Apparently, he's the guy that came up with the binding Trump ritual, which is so cool. I mean, we've heard about that for years. And I'm excited to have him here, and we'll ask him a few questions. Can we, I think we should probably start out with, tell us a little bit about the binding Trump ritual, and then I'm going to go on to other stuff.
Sure. Yeah, well, like many people, with the election, the 2016 election, I found myself terrified at what I saw transpiring. For me, it looked like, and it still looks very like, the birth of fascism in the United States under the guise of Trumpism. And for anyone who's familiar with how fascism works, I mean, it's not an exaggeration. The demonization of immigrants, the misogyny that he was exhibiting, the idea of calling stuff fake news and putting down institutions and journalists, and just the patriarchal aspects of his candidacy. I mean, it was just flagrantly anti-democratic and illiberal in the broadest sense. It was terrifying. And so after the election, stuff just started unfolding, just like many of us had predicted and knew was coming, with the ban on Muslim immigrants from certain countries. And most of you probably remember how people flocked to the airports to sort of protest that. And it was just like every day was a fire hose of awful news that was coming from this administration. And, I was one of those "I told you so" people. But at that point, this is what was happening in our country. So I was trying to think of a way to be an activist, and in a way that would break through like the news cycle, something that would come out of left field. I see a comment real quick. I'll take that because it's true. Sean is saying it's not a birth. It's been here since the founding. It's just been okay to let themselves be seen. That's very true. As we saw, Donald Trump just told people it's okay to be an outright racist and an outright misogynist, and just to say horrible things about people, broke all the norms. So thanks for that comment, Sean. That is absolutely true. But it was just such the level of the horror just became overwhelming, and I felt like I had to do something. As someone who's been an activist all my life, I was just compelled. But I knew, we have the Women's March and the Science March, and we all go to DC if we can. We hop on a bus with other people and we march and we carry our signs and we make our voices heard, and then we go home. And especially nowadays, the news media is just, they've seen it all before, and they don't really they've never covered marches very well, honestly, since I've been an activist in my teens. So those things are important to do, but at the same time, I felt like if we wanted to do something that would break through the public consciousness and capture the attention of people, it had to be a little weird. It had to be a little left of center. It had to be something people hadn't seen before. And I always admired, in particular, the yippies and their activism in the 1960s, particularly with the Vietnam War. And in particular, Levitation and Exorcism of the Pentagon by Jerry Rubin and Allen Ginsberg and that whole crew. I always thought that that had just the element of humor and absurdity and creative power, that it really ignited the popular imagination. No matter if you thought it was silly, if you thought it was ridiculous, it still captured attention. And there are those images of people putting, flowers in the gun barrels of the National Guard who were there protecting the Pentagon. And that was just so powerful and such an iconic image that stuck with people. It changed perception, it changed consciousness. So in that manner of creative activism with sort of a silly edge, sort of an absurd edge, but also I've always been a magician. Now, I'm not a witch. I don't identify as a witch, but I do identify as a magician. I've been practicing magic most of my adult life, since my 30s, roughly. And so the idea just came to me one night talking with a friend, and I said, well, what about like a spell, like a mass ritual that people can do? Again, going back to some of that creative activism from the 1960s and 70s, like the group Witch, the Women's International Terrorist Conspiracy from Hell, things like that were just had enough of an element of sort of absurdity, but yet enough seriousness to carry it through. And I thought maybe a few people might find this interesting and join. So I wrote it up and I posted it online on the website Medium. And it took off within hours. It was overwhelming how quickly it went viral and how many people were contacting me immediately. News media started contacting me, and it just blew up beyond anything I could have imagined. I had people telling me in other countries, they overheard people talking about this ritual, that they were going to do the ritual. And I should just add too that this ritual was created to be sort of ecumenical, like a magically ecumenical ritual. And from the beginning, so many people of different spiritual beliefs and religious beliefs really grasped the hold of it. I think it filled a void, it filled a need that a lot of people had. They were just dying to do something and dying to do something different. And this ritual really just, I think, hit a nerve. I mean, as all of us on this call know, so many people are adopting, alternative spiritual practices and magic and tarot. All these things are sort of cyclical, and man, did it really just explode among young people in particular, but people of all generations. The witches, I love. It became in the media, it became witches versus Trump, and I thought that was beautiful, and I was so grateful for the witch community, as broad and diverse as it is, that they really took this and made it something global and something really powerful and really serious. And a Facebook group started. We've got like almost 7,000 members of the Bind Trump Facebook group. Lots of people took it and made it their own. And it's something that I really did not expect to have the momentum that it did. But I'm so kind of humbled that my words happen to captivate so many people, and that we all, maybe some of us here have written rituals, and when you hear other people like saying the words that you've created for a ritual and following the steps of the ritual, it's like, it's humbling. It's like deeply, deeply humbling that something that I just created and put out there became so helpful for so many people. And I'll end by saying that for me, some of the most rewarding things I heard from people were that so many people who had never done a ritual in their lives, never done magic, might have been the farthest thing from their minds. So many of them said, why not? Why the hell not? I've done everything else. I've written letters. I make phone calls every day. I send emails. I sign petitions. Why the hell not? And my hope is that a lot of those people got the taste of what it is to do a ritual, to do something with intention, to get just a taste of what magic is in their lives. And that was really the most humbling thing of all. And the other thing that just made me so grateful was how many people said that this helped them get through the Trump years. It certainly did that for me. I mean, I think so many of us felt beaten down and just despairing so often. I mean, so full of despair at watching this man and his people just get away with more and more and more, to the point where they attempted to overthrow the US government and to
failed.
be able. I'm sorry.
And failed.
Yeah, they sure tried though. But to do a ritual every month at the waning crescent moon, I would, all my angst and despair would just build and build and build. And then at midnight, on the night that we did that ritual, all of us around the world linked together at the same time. It just was cleansing. It was like an exorcism of all that Trumpian horror. And so that too, like that makes me feel so grateful that I was able to help people expunge that energy, that despair, and then have the energy to move forward and to keep fighting and keep resisting.
Yeah, I was reminded when I read about how it spread, of the Women's March. You remember back right after Trump won, God knows how, but and one woman said, let's have a march with women and we'll wear pink hats.
Mm-hmm.
And she woke up the next day and it had gone to thousands. That sounds similar. It was needed.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people were just, just trying anything, trying new things and experimenting.
The thing is, I believe in magic. So my thought is, what would he have gotten away with if this hadn't been going on? I read many analysts saying that a lot of his horrible things he did were testing, seeing what he could get away with. And bet it was really awful. It was crisis after crisis after crisis. Every day, every week, it would be something horrible. But what if, because I believe in magic, I believe this must have helped.
Yeah, I think so. And even if you don't believe in magic, and I know a lot of people participated who didn't really believe in magic, as probably most of us believe it, there's still, at minimum, when you do a ritual, you feel your own power. It's a way of summoning up your own power and just saying words with intention and doing actions with intention and visualizing. I mean, even if you just think that's a psychological process, I don't, but even if you do think it's just a psychological process, it's a powerful psychological process. And I absolutely agree. I see several folks on the Zoom call who've been part of this magic resistance since the beginning. And I do believe that we pushed back energetically. And did we stop him? Well, our goal was to drive him from office. That was the stated goal of the ritual. That's right there in the words of the ritual. And it's strangely enough, I've had some people say, oh, it didn't work. One rather famous author, magician, recently wrote a book that, you know, on the dust jacket of his book, he says, well, the magic resistance was a failure. And I just made me sit back and say, well, our goal was to drive him from office. So how did we fail? You know, he's out of office. We did it. We all collectively did it. So, you know, I'm kind of puzzled by the reaction from some folks, but for me, yeah, we were part of the equation. And
perhaps what we need to do now is to refocus the resistance to binding the followers. It's very difficult when you've got what they say 40% of the population still likes them.
mm-hmm.
But maybe if we can bind 10% of them, the others will go back into the hate closet the way they were before Trump. So
yeah, I mean, certainly people, there's the one thing I learned from the Bind Trump Facebook group is there are many ideas of how to move forward. Like, what do we do now? Personally, I strongly advised everyone in the Bind Trump group, and I think a lot of us kind of agreed to just take some recuperation time, take some recovery time, like recharge our batteries. He's clearly not going anywhere. You know, will he make another attempt to run for the presidency? Very possibly. In which case, you know, we'll be back. We're not going anywhere. But it's as far as my beliefs as to like where we go next, I think it's important to have like a focus and focusing on his followers just seems kind of too diffuse to
yes.
me. You know what I mean?
That's
like,
where I was going.
And yeah, and a more kind of laser focus like we did with. And now, you know, at the same time, the binding spell said, and all those who abet his wickedness. So he was the focal point, but we cast a pretty wide net. And I think that net was also effective in a lot of ways. So yeah, it's an interesting time for magical activism because there are so many options. You know, we just saw abortion basically made illegal in Texas last night in the dark of night with the Supreme Court. So, you know, where do we go next? There's so many issues. Climate, you know, there's just so many pressing issues that I'm thinking perhaps at this point people develop their own like focus groups for the issues that they are, you know, most fired up about. And you know, but at the same time, we've built this big movement, and you know, we did what we intended to do, but there's still a lot left to do.
Yeah, we have to make being a Nazi, or if they're not calling themselves Nazis, not something you want to do again. And
yeah,
it's like if you don't, as I tell people, you don't try and stop a hurricane. What you do
right.
is you protect your house, your family, and have as many other people protect theirs, and that's a lot more effective than trying to turn a hurricane.
Yeah, and it depends on your, you know, your philosophy of magic and what it can do. The idea of driving Trump from office is, to me, an easier form of magic than turning around a hurricane. You know, because there are processes in effect to bind people doing bad things. You know, there are laws, there's a huge resistance out there that's not aligned with the magic resistance at all. So the idea of driving him from office is something that seems like it could be affected. It goes back to the idea of magic. Well, I want to do magic to make a Ferrari appear out in my driveway. That's not going to happen. That's not the way to think of magic. Magic, I think, needs to work with natural laws and just kind of shape things a little bit, or push the energy in the proper direction, in the direction that you want it to go in.
Mhm. Well, I'm gonna once again plug your book, because I found it really good. I got it on the ebook, because that allows me to have it right then, not wait for not have to go to the bookstore, not have to wait for it to get there. And the internal links were really useful. You do the cleansing, and then you click on that and it goes right there. And it's like, yes, I love when someone has good internal links. It makes an ebook brilliant. Not just the cheaper and easier to store alternative. On the other hand, then you might want to go buy the copy in case you lose power and then you need it anyway. But there's a huge range. You are not just focused on let's get Trump out of office. You have the most brilliant collection of assorted spells, from the Me Too, the Black Lives Matter, my personal favorite, the calling bullshit spell.
Yeah.
Fake news. You want to destroy the ability to get people to. You can't. If you destroy the media and people's faith in it, and faith in the government, you're 3/4 of the way there.
Yeah, and look at the pandemic, and what's happening, and I've called out particular occultists who are propagating, COVID's a hoax and anti-vax
Really
stuff. Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, that's the calling bullshit spell really is aimed at the propagators of bullshit. And unfortunately, I've seen, and in particular, the occult community, the wellness community, in particular, yoga communities. My good friend Nick, who's on this call, has been particularly vocal, criticizing some of the abuses in the yoga and wellness communities. And it's just been terrifying to me to see witches and occultists just fall prey to some of this, alt-right fascist stuff. And it's always been there. I mean, we all know, those of us who have been involved in occultism long enough know that there's always been the edge communities that are, very white supremacist, and just, quite simply fascist. But it's spread. And I see Sean mentioned QAnon, and how that's infected so many people. In a way, conspiracies when I was younger used to be kind of fun. It was the who killed JFK. I mean, not that that's a funny thing, but conspiracies used to be sort of trying to interrogate the power structure. And most of the conspiracy theorists were sort of left aligned. But now it's just like I just completely abandoned the conspiracy community that I used to be, generally part of, because I couldn't stand the toxicity and the rightward tilt of it. And that's also infected the occult community. And I think it's important to call those people out. Not as a means of like censorship, but just to let our peers know what some of these folks are saying. And some have gone like way deep into just some really dark places. COVID denial, Trumpism. It's sad. And you like to think that especially witches being it's at least some traditions, very earth centered, wouldn't embrace someone who is, basically destroyed in all, the environmental safeguards protecting us all, and gave license to corporate entities to just pollute and build pipelines and trash the earth. If you're a witch, how can you possibly support that sort of thing? But it's out there.
Oh, yeah, that was another thing I wanted to say was really wonderful. At the end of each of the rituals, I really liked that you finished up with, after you've done the ritual and the spell, you clean up after yourself, and then you do something practical with then you go write your congressman, or then you go feed the hungry, or then you go, just, yeah. I said, this guy's got his head on straight. I'm loving it.
Well, I try. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say it's on straight most of the time, but it's.
Well,
But
not everybody is. Some of us embrace the the spooky foo stuff to the point where we hurt our own credibility, and which is too bad, but it's a thing.
Well, I just think, doing magic you should be as responsible a citizen, and if you make a mess somewhere, if you leave some candles, then pick something up. Just be responsible. And I've always also thought that, well, if you want to dispose of something at a crossroads, there's probably a 7-Eleven at the crossroads, or a gas station with a trash can and a dumpster. So, be conscious, just be a conscious, good citizen when you're doing your magic.
I was also amused. I grabbed one of the photographs and I said, what are those baby carrots doing there on the baby carrots on an altar? And it's like, oh, right. And then when I saw in the book why they're baby carrots.
Yeah, some people, that was the humor, and I think humor enhances magic. And not it doesn't have to be so serious all the time. I mean, it certainly can be, and there's time for seriousness, but if you bring a little bit of sort of chaotic, humorous energy into it, I think that could really feed into the work that you're doing. And that's why also at the very end of the Trump binding spell, we laugh. We laugh at him, because what does a malignant narcissist hate the most is when people laugh at them. And I feel like that energy of just openly mocking and laughing at him just gives the energy of that spell, that's the send off, we're laughing at you. And to me, that just feels powerful, and that's a real weapon. That's a real weapon against powerful people, going all the way back to the emperor's new clothes and things like that. I'm not buying your bullshit. I'm going to laugh at you. I'm going to mock you because you deserve it.
I love the inclusion of "you're fired" into it. You're fired. You're fired. Yes, yes. I have to admit that I laughed out loud, squeed, and I really this was a book I really enjoyed reading. The Unflattering Photo, The Fool's Gold. But the unflattering photo makes sense, because if you've got an unflattering photo, yes, that is going to power the spell more. It just made sense to me.
Yeah, and just I think so many people, who don't really do magic much or don't do rituals, to watch that image of him burn. I mean, that's a lesson in magic in itself, is the power of fire, watching fire consume this, and to, to realize that there are thousands, or, sometimes tens of thousands of people doing this, watching this man's face burn at the same time. I mean, it's uh, uh, there are often times when I would be, a lot of times I did this ritual with other people, especially like the first time there were, 40, 50 people doing this ritual, but I did it every month for, for over 4 years. So there were a lot of times I just do it by myself. And as I would be saying these words, like I really felt like I could hear. And I know several others on this call, Nick and Karina as well, mentioned, so many people mentioned that, like we could hear the echo of all the voices together. And that's another thing I think that was so important, because doing a ritual and knowing other people are doing it is one thing, but doing it at the same time around the planet, there were people on other continents doing this ritual with us at all hours, on their time, but all at the same time. And that to me was really powerful. And I felt that, I could feel all of that energy from so many people, like linking us together in a big chain or a web, or however you want to think about it. And it was just such a powerful experience. And lots of other people, attested to that it was like you could hear the chorus of voices, just echoing and reverberating as we said those words.
I loved it. I liked your chapter on self-care, because I love the ecumenical way you made magic accessible to people who don't think in magical terms usually. And yet children are born knowing magic, and you're just putting it back in. It's like children are born knowing how to play, and then forget, and adults forget. You made it possible again. You're a national treasure in the magical community, in my view.
Oh God, well that is too kind.
Well, no, I'm just saying that you have made people who weren't using magic feel comfortable doing things like this, even if they think it's a placebo effect. It's still gonna work. And
well, that was the goal. The goal was to be as inclusive as possible. And I had been trying to write a book on magic, but I hadn't found a publisher. And then this spell blew up. So my goal with the book was to sort of like teach magic, not just to be a spell, a spell book for people who already do magic, but I kind of had to sort of sneak some of that in. But my goal was that maybe people who, had just been interested in activism and maybe, intrigued by magic, that they might pick this up. And the goal was to kind of give them like a broad grounding in magical thinking as well as magical practice. And that's why from the very beginning, my view of magic is we all do magic, even if we don't realize it, even if we don't call it that. And, my wife's grandmother was Jewish. She would light a candle for everything, always lighting candles. My grandparents were Catholic, and I mean, you want to see magic, lighting novena candles and saint paraphernalia all over the place, and like the little altars a lot of Catholics build. So it's, a lot of people don't call it magic, but it's magic. I have a very broad definition of magic.
Want to expand on that a little? Maybe talk about, you had things about, putting the pictures on the jar candles and things, and how, I had heard before, and it totally made sense, the ancestor altar has to be a different one than your working altar. But please talk about that a bit.
Sure. Well, my original magical training was witchcraft. I was one of those, I picked up Scott Cunningham's Guide for the Solo Practitioner. And, I lived in downtown Baltimore, and I was out on my on the roof of the apartment building, you know, chanting during the eclipse and things like that. So, but as a kid, I just always thought magically. Like I would always draw little diagrams and try to make things happen. And like you said, you know, children are born knowing how to do this stuff. Children are born into an animistic universe. Like they realize that that teddy bear has a life force to it. And if you just throw it in the corner, you know, it can get angry at you. I mean, it's children just intuitively understand this, and we just kind of crush it out of them as they get older. But so my grounding was in witchcraft, but then you know, I always was interested in chaos magic and the idea of thought forms and servitors and things like that. And but what happened is I just kind of I started doing Golden Dawn magic and got really deep into Kabbalistic magic and all the Golden Dawn's associations and tarot and all that stuff. And then one day, like my head just, I couldn't wrap my head around the system anymore. And I also started understanding that some of the historical beliefs that the Golden Dawn was based upon were not factual. I mean, everything's made up anyway. You know, it's all made up. But some of the underlying ideas of the Golden Dawn system just didn't work for me anymore. So then I decided to go back to the very beginning, and I started like, let's go as far back as I can to understand magic, and just started with the Greeks and the Egyptians, and worked my way up through, you know, sort of medieval grimoire magic, but most importantly, like cross-culturally, like I look to other magical systems, not just Western magic, because I think it's easy to get mired in Western magic and to believe that that's the only sort of magic. But then you just travel a little bit. You know, I traveled a lot in Mexico, and I watched shamans in Mexico doing their healings. And it just opened my eyes. It expanded my understanding of magic, and I realized that magic's universal. It's everywhere. We call it different things, we do it differently, but it's all really the same thing. And so, you know, for the book, I tried to distill some of that down and just look at what I call the template of magic, like the universal aspects of magic, like contagion. You know, there's a reason why if you're trying to do something bad to someone, you want to get their fingernails or their hair or something like that, or a picture of them, like the Trump binding. And they're just these underlying elements of magic, these underlying practices that are just kind of universal. So I try to start to tease out the universal aspects of magic that I could find and sort of work with them and see what worked for me. And so that's why a lot of the magic that I do and a lot of the magic in the book seems like it's from different traditions, because it is. And I think it's really important to not appropriate and to respect traditions, in particular, traditions that are initiatory. I'm an initiated Freemason and a couple different orders of the Masons. And that's not magical at all. Unfortunately, I found out that's, you know, it's all about sort of like who's going to do the pancake breakfast and that sort of thing. But I respect the initiatory process, and I would never expose, you know, the secrets of those initiations, because the secrecy is just part of the tradition. In the same way, I would never work with a tradition that was a closed initiatory tradition unless I was part of it. So I'm very careful not to appropriate, but at the same time, magic is universal. So there are elements in the way that I practice magic that you can be found in hoodoo or conjure, witchcraft, but they're also found in shamanic traditions. So, you know, I'm also there's a lot of talk about, you know, this is closed or that's closed. And yes, some things are closed, but I think some people go a little over the top with, there are witch talk folks saying that tarot is a closed tradition and things like that, which is just absolutely silly. So I think we need to be able to look at other forms of magic and the way other people practice and incorporate some of that, but always to do it respectfully. And since I'm a writer, I always believe in giving correct attributions to the work that I quote or that I use. And I think it has to be the same way in magical practices too. So yeah, some of the things I do are, look like, what my grandmother did in Catholicism. Some look like folk magic traditions from my wife's Jewish grandmother. Some come from witchcraft. Some come from chaos magic and things like that. But I think we all need to find our own way. We all need to find what works for us, and innovate and try things and fail and experiment. And that's the way we learn, because what might work for you or for the other folks on this call might not work as well for me.
That's where the science comes in. I love Sean. Well, you've probably heard of people saying metaphysician. We call Sean a metaphysicist.
Metaphysical engineer, specifically.
I love it. I love it.
It's science. Magic is both an art and a science. And experiment.
Are you familiar with Arthur C. Clarke's, what they call Clarke's Law? Any sufficiently, well, this is Star Wars corollary to Clarke's Law. Any sufficiently sophisticated magic is indistinguishable from high technology.
Exactly. And I love the quote you put in here. Isaac Bonewitz used to say, it's true, we made it all up and it's still true.
Yep.
That's such a wonderful quote. And that's kind of what fueled the chaos magic movement. And what I drew from it is that I'm absolutely respectful for anyone and their tradition and what they work with in their tradition. I might not agree with it, but I think we make things work. We create systems in our minds, and then we apply them, and then what works we take and we move on. And there's another great quote from Lon Milo Duquette that the subtitle of one of his books is it's all in your head, you just don't know how big your head is. and that has always, like, that is, if there's a truism in magic, that's the one I always keep coming back to.
I love Lon Milo's stuff. I should try and get him on here.
Oh yeah, I'll be here for that if you do.
He's just, the thing that where you put Ganesh, you chant Ganesha to Pop Goes the Weasel.
Yeah.
Do you know that one?
I do, and
if you chant Ganesha's name, which is something that they do in the Hindu tradition, and you chant it to Pop Goes the Weasel, you don't have to count out the 108 times iterations. What you do is you only have to count 4.5 rounds of Pop Goes the Weasel, and you automatically have Ganesh, Ganesh, Ganesha, Ganesh, Ganesh, Ganesha, and then you don't have to have somebody counting to 108 for you. This is so cool.
He's brilliant, and then again, that's the humorous element that he's so good at bringing into discussions that get so heavy sometimes when you're talking about magic, and that's why I appreciate people like him that can bring an element of humor and an element of playfulness into what we do.
Yeah, because the power of laughter. I wanted to ask you, you had this wonderful string of spells. Have you come up, since you put out the book, with some new ones you'd like to tell us about?
I have not. That really,
Dang.
I just to kind of the process of writing that book was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. My editor and the publisher decided it needed to come out before the midterm election, so the 2018 midterm election, which gave me a month to write the book.
You did that in a month?
1 month.
Uh,
And yeah,
I'm
I
going
mean,
to say that you must have had an awful lot of it done beforehand in your previous, no? You did that in a month.
no, it was like, I feel like it almost killed me writing this book because, I don't live on my writing. I have a day job like most writers I know. So I would work a full day, come home, kiss my wife, say hi to my kids for a few minutes, and go into my basement office where I am now and work until like 3 or 4 in the morning. And I can't just write a ritual, and maybe some some magic writers can do that. I have to do it. I can't. I have to feel how it works. I have to have all the pieces. So that added another layer, from the writing and the research and the editing, and also coming up with these rituals and testing them, test driving a ritual and then finding out that no, this doesn't work. It makes it too awkward. Or no, you can't, you physically can't use these two components at the same time. It doesn't, and things like that. So it was brutal. So no, I have not written any rituals since then.
Okay.
And also, like I said, I feel like the whole Trump binding, the whole magic resistance movement really took a lot of energy, and it was a lot. I mean, to do a ritual every month, and a ritual that was, really, it takes a lot of energy when I put my all into a ritual. I don't just kind of do it half-assed and things like that. So doing a monthly ritual with that kind of energy behind it, and doing other rituals. We did a blue wave spell, and then we did another blue wave spell for when the Georgia election was kind of up in the air, and various other rituals like from the book. And it burned me out. And that's also why I suggested to a lot of the Trump binding folks in the Facebook group and elsewhere, like, just re-energize. Like, we gave it everything, and now we just need to ground for a while and just lay low and watch what happens, because I believe the Trump binding is kind of still unfolding. The effects of it are still kind of rolling through consciousness and having effects. So no, I have not written anything new. I'd like to.
No.
And I think I may, but I think there's a good bit in that book.
You have to recover first. You don't walk on your leg. You don't put the crutches down until you say, okay, the bone is reknit.
Right. Exactly.
But
exactly.
The fact that you tested it makes so much. My books so far are all cookbooks. And you don't put out a cookbook without testing the recipes. If you haven't done the spell, how are you going to know which way the energy is manipulated by the components of the spell?
Exactly.
I mean, that seems obvious, and if it isn't obvious to somebody, then I don't think they're doing magic.
Yeah, I think, I mean,
they're doing it a very different way than I do it.
Yeah. And there's, there are these books of like 1,000 spells and things like that. And of course, some of them I'm sure the writer hasn't done, but I mean, it's okay. It's certainly okay. That's valid too. But just for me on a personal level, like I couldn't put it out there and without test driving it first.
Yeah. I'd like to talk a little bit about the ethics, because I put that into the description of the show tonight. I've always been very I consider magic a practice, a tool. Magic is a tool that you use, a skill that you lose, a set of skills, and you can use it for whatever you use it. And the ethics have to do with what you're picking to do, not what that you could do similar things with music. You could do similar things with art. You could do similar things with normal politics, if there's such a thing. And I wanted, I know it's in the book, and many of the people who are here have probably seen the book, but maybe some of the people watching it on YouTube haven't yet. Go out and get it because it's a good book. This looks to me like the kind of book I would give somebody who wanted to take up magic. But it is, as you say, it's binding magic, which has a bad name. And can you share your thoughts?
I mean, the ethics question comes up a lot. Initially, a lot of the pushback that I got was from Wiccans who said that, well, you're violating the threefold law, the Reed, whatever you want to call it. That's a valid perspective, but I explained to some of them, well, Gerald Gardner pretty much kind of came up with this, and if you're a Gardnerian or if you follow, the offshoots of Gardnerian Wicca, then that's fine. That if that's the way you operate. I don't operate that way. I'm not a witch. I see magic, like you mentioned, as a technology, as a tool. And my general comeback to a lot of that was, well, let's say you have a child and someone, an older adult who's been arrested for pedophilia or something like that is stalking your child after school. Now, what do you do? I mean, would you, of course, you're going to probably call the police if you see them following your child. You're going to do everything. If you see them approaching your child, you're going to put your body in the way to stop them. And if they push back, you're going to push them harder. If they hit you, you're going to hit them back harder. You're protecting something or someone that you love. Magic is a tool. So why wouldn't you use magic in an aggressive way against someone who's trying to harm you or someone that you love? It's self-defense. I mean, no one on earth, even Gandhi, Gandhi said, well, you can defend yourself if you're getting hurt, push back, try not to harm the person, but try to stop someone from harming you or someone else, like restrain them. And that's where a binding spell, I think that's why that made the most sense to me, because I knew if I came out and was hexing Donald Trump, and a lot of people hexed him, and that's their prerogative, and that's perfectly valid too. But for me, I thought binding spells are some of the oldest spells that exist anyway. And my conception of a binding spell, and this in particular, was just to stop, to hold him, to keep him from doing harmful things, not to harm him in particular, which opens you up to accusations of, all sorts of ethical, magical violations and things like that. But I have no problem with people hexing people who are harming others. I have no problem hexing Nazis, just as I have no problem if someone decides to, punch a Nazi. I'm not a violent person. Like, I don't believe in violence. I'm very non-violent in every aspect of but I believe in self-defense. And I believe there sometimes people cross a line when negative magic is perfectly valid. It makes sense. Why wouldn't you do it? I mean, if you would do everything in your power to stop a corporation from raising a forest that you love, you would write letters, you would, maybe stand in front of a bulldozer, things like that. Why wouldn't you use magic to stop it too? I mean, people that say magic can only be used for like to make things better and happy and positivity, that makes absolutely no sense to me. And just, it's a tool. Use it when you need it. Use it to stop people from harming you and from harming other people, and push back. And if pushing back doesn't work, then push back a little harder. Use your tools for what you need to do. And I don't believe that, that hexing a Nazi is going to bounce back on me 3 times. I believe that Nazi's doing so much damage that I'm actually kind of, if I'm hexing that Nazi, I'm preventing damage from a lot of other people. So that concept just never made sense to me.
Me neither, and that's why I wanted you to share that bit with it. But and so did you? The book has things for self-care, like you had things on breathing and on nature bathing. So did you kind of push? Did you spread a little of that around when you told everybody to go out and recover and recuperate?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think it's really important. I created one ritual that wasn't in the book, that was essentially a Tibetan practice, which is when you breathe in suffering and you breathe out healing. And so, I took that general idea of that practice and tried to get people to do that, because I feel like there is so much pain and there is so much despair and negativity still. I mean, every day, if you just focus on what's happening to the climate and the earth, if you care about women's reproductive rights, I mean, watching what just happened in Texas, just simply appalling. So self-care is critical. And especially as people who do magic and who are energetically sensitive people, which a lot of us are. That's why we do this stuff in the first place. It's really critical to take care of yourself, whether that's through, art, breathing, just nature bathing, like you mentioned, is also in the book. Just doing things to replenish your batteries. Because particularly so many of us have burned the candle at both ends as activists over these past years, that you can't be a good activist and you can't be a good magician or witch if you're depleted. So that's critical. I made sure that was included in the book.
That is
And speaking of art, I want to shout out to Karina down below. She is the official artist of the Magic Resistance. Those of you who saw those sort of like posters for the Magic Resistance Needs You, that's the artist right there. I mean, she brought so much creativity and just joyful art to this movement that I just wanted to shout out. On my screen, she's like 2 down below me right there. So I wanted to thank her for everything she contributed. And so many people brought their artistic energy. The one thing I loved about the binding, every time we would do the binding, afterward on the Facebook group, people would post pictures of their altars, and just the creativity and beauty. I mean, I wish someone would collect them and do a book. They're so, because you could see each individual's soul, each individual's energy in the arrangement of things on their altars. Some are really elaborate, some are just really simple, but really powerful in their simplicity. And that was just a joy for me to see, as all the creativity that fueled what we were doing.
Well, we're running out of time. They won't kick us off, but we ought to be polite.
Does anyone, can I take questions? I mean, I figure maybe folks have questions.
That was where I was going. Has anybody got any questions that you'd hope to get answered? You'll have to unmute, of course.
I did see a lot of great stuff in the chat. So thanks for everyone. I see Sean said that use the lead sheet in the sewer method, toxic positivity. No one quoted the rule of three when we sank the Armada or turned Hitler east. Exactly. And I talk about a lot of the history of magic resistance, you know, that we call it now, but there's so much. I could have written a whole book on that. Phila just messaged me and said, could you explain the sigil you use? Yeah, I got a lot of questions about that. I use the Austin Spare sort of sigil method that became real popularized, where you take a phrase and break it apart and eliminate the consonants or the double so for me, I'm like visually a very visual person, so I broke the phrase bind Trump down and broke it into pieces and then put it back together. And for me, a sigil only works when it clicks, and you have to play with it. You have to, it's like taking pieces of a puzzle and suddenly they all just magically fit together. So that sigil just encapsulated the whole bind Trump movement. And once it clicked, I felt it. I felt that sigil. I put it on, made the candle out of it. I make these pendants. And if anyone is interested in those, I just shoot me an email or go to my website. I could send you the link. I sell them through this online 3D printer, but they, and everything from like, steel to silver, just because I wanted to wear it. And I made t-shirts and hoodies and things like that. And it just became, it became the symbol of everything that we're doing, and it caught on in a viral way, just like the ritual itself caught on in a viral way. It was so amazing to see it kind of spreading out in the world out there, and people using it as their avatars, and Karina putting it in all the artwork. And then what I love the most is whenever someone would get, zapped by what we were doing, when one of like Betsy DeVos getting thrown out of government or something, I would take a picture of that person and put the sigil like right on their third eye and post it on the Facebook group. And it just became like such a beautiful moment to see these people getting taken down by the resistance. And then, it was almost like a mugshot with that little sigil pasted on their third eye. And so the sigil is just really simple. It just encapsulates the Bind Trump movement and the larger magic resistance movement.
Thanks for asking that.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. You're very welcome for that. Also, Sean said magic is also a martial art, and yeah, and martial arts are magic. I mean, you look at the chi that's used in martial arts, and Aikido and judo, using energy, from the person against them. And yeah, that's a beautiful way to think of it. Absolutely. Any other questions? You can drop them in the chat or just
and anyone who isn't already there, I've thrown the link to his website up on the chat, so that when we put this up on YouTube, I'll have to add that to the comments then on the. I am not. We have other people that do the technology. I do cooking. I do healing. I do divination. I need a few more decades before I'm good at computers, I think. This is me trying very hard not to say I'm bad at them.
Well, you're doing a great job moderating tonight, so it's appreciated.
Oh, it's just a joy to have a guest like this, and I am very excited that I followed the link from your article to your book and to hear. This is, as I say, I recommend this book. I think this can be one of those books you give a new person so that they can learn without pain.
Yeah, yeah, that was the goal. I mean, it was, I tried to, I aimed it at newbies, you know, because there were so many people that got their first taste of magic with the Trump binding, but also, you know, I wanted to make it useful for experienced people, like a lot of folks on this call too, and maybe there would be something new or a different way of approaching the magic that they do. And as I've said, with all of the spells and rituals that I've written, like, take it, make it your own, you know, work it so that it fits your tradition. That's what magic is all about, is taking something and making it work for you. And so that was really the goal, and I hope that's what it accomplished.
Well, great. And I'm gonna say thank you, since there don't seem to be more more questions there. This sounds good. Okay, and this is where I finish up by saying that Changing Times, Changing Worlds is a conference that is supposed to encourage people to get into things from divination to healing, alternate forms of alternate complementary forms of healing, exploring the supernatural world, and being totally ecumenical. So it's going to be this year. It's going to be on Zoom again, as it was last year. We hope that next year maybe we can be physical again, but this year, it's because we are virtual, we are doing it over a week again. We will be doing Monday through Friday evenings, and then Saturday and Sunday all day on Zoom. So that's November 8th to 14th, and we hope you will join us. Check out what other things about the Changing Times, Changing Worlds community on Facebook and on our website, which is ctcw.net. Okay, well, that's it. Thank you again. This is a wonderful, wonderful, I think I overwrote the link to Changing Times, Changing Worlds is in the chat now.
Yep, I see it there. Yeah.
So I thank you. I haven't had a lot of fun since at least last week. A lot. Actually, it's more. I do much better when there's a guest. I think a dialogue is a lot easier than a monologue.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Your questions were great. I look forward to the conference.
I hope you come on, and
I hope so. And thanks to everybody who joined us tonight.
Indeed.
Thanks for the questions. Thanks for your attention. Thanks to all of you who've been part of this, you know, wild movement since it was, you know, came into being. And thank you so much for this opportunity tonight.
Well, I'm so happy you did it, but I'm going to push the button now and end the show for the night. We are